Jay Shah has been appointed as the chairman of the ICC. He was unopposed. There was no contender against him. He held BCCI for 5 years, held the post of the secretary, and has also been associated with the ICC, associated with the finance committee of the ICC, with the ACC. But this is his first stint as the chairman of the ICC at the age of 35 years. It makes him the youngest ICC chairman. Hello and welcome to Cricket8 podcast. I'm Megha and join me here is Rob Barron, and he's already smirking because there's so much to look forward to with Jay Shah at the helm, considering what all happened under him at the BCCI, the improvements made, and otherwise as well. It was an eventful stint. Yes, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, I think given that there's huge concerns worldwide that India are getting close to monopolising everything to do with cricket, that a 35-year-old Indian guy can be completely unopposed to run the whole thing. That sounds good to me. I can't envisage any problems with that moving forward. Um, I think like he's great at doing deals, isn't he, Jay Shah? Like
Yeah.
he's done the big TV deals and stuff. And I think it was him. The figure I read the other day was that India, on the last deal he did, were getting something like. So he propelled the IPL into being second only to the NFL in terms of how much a game it costs to put on TV. Like it's bigger than the Premier League football. It's massive. Like he's done amazingly well. So he's clearly very good at what he does. But the figure I read was India now get 38+%
Yeah.
of the TV money, right? India get that. So um there's what 106 countries in the cricket world right now, or 100 and something, and India getting 36%. I think England, Australia get 5 or 6 maybe. The full members get about 5, and then everyone else fights out for the scraps at the bottom. Um, as we've discussed many times, Mega, cricket is imbalanced and it's not run properly. From the outside, knowing nothing about politics, it doesn't sound ideal that an Indian guy can run completely unopposed. However, the guy at the top has to be, or the lady at the top has to be from some country. So
Yeah.
if they're from England, then everyone could say, well, now look, now they're going to do everything in favour, and it's much better that it's Jay Shah doing it than Giles Clark or one of those clowns. Um, most politicians that I've come across are awful at this kind of thing, and I'd much rather have a businessman type at the helm. I'm all for that as far as making cricket, but and here's the big but: we have to try and make sure. And what my big hope is that every country gets a chance to grow cricket and make cricket a better and fairer game for everybody. And at the moment, it's skewed very heavily towards India, particularly, but the bigger the cricketing nation or the better your team is right now, the more money you get from the ICC. And that isn't fair. That's not a fair sport. So even the Premier League, which the Football Premier League in England, which is one of the biggest sporting leagues ever, um, that is as we're seeing with Man City's 115 charges and teams
Hmm.
getting dot points all the time and nobody knowing where anybody stands because lawyers are challenging other lawyers all the time and whatever. It's clear there's clearly plenty of corruption and rule bending going on in the Premier League. However, the thing that is fair and the reason why as a sports league it's brilliantly competitive, it's regarded as the best football league in the world, the Premier League, is because the TV money from Sky in the UK is distributed equally amongst the 20 teams. So Man City get the same amount of money from
Yeah.
the TV as Ipswich do, right? So that's fair. That gives Ipswich a chance. It gives them a chance to grow as a club, right? Which is what it's all about. If you manage to get yourself, and they put all sorts of things in for grassroots football, parachute payments, all this stuff. I don't want to talk about football all day. This is a cricket podcast. But cricket could learn from that. So football is very greedy. Football isn't a meritocracy. It's who's got the most money does the best. Uh, However, there is some elements that are fair, and cricket is going to still continue to be greedy. and it's going to neglect certain things that it shouldn't be neglecting. But at least try now when you've got all this cash. Jay Shah is not going to be asking anybody to lend him, 50 rupees anytime soon. Think about the game. That's what I ask. And I'm not going to shoot the guy
You
down
know
because
what 50
he hasn't done
rupees is
anything yet.
worth? Because you use the Indian currency.
2p or something? 2p? I'm not
Which
good at
dollars
that.
are you talking about?
Uh,
USD, in terms of USD?
yeah, how many cents? Like two?
It's barely one USD.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to be asking to borrow any money, is he, Jay Shah? He's all right. So so I'm not going to sit here and cuss the guy out because he hasn't done anything yet. But what we don't want to see is India getting incredibly bigger, and the IPL taking 6 months out of the year, and everybody else just slowly, we'll see the associate nations that have been doing so well of late suddenly, or not, maybe not suddenly, but gradually dying off or not qualifying for things. And the big test of the ICC is to make sure that they stop excluding things, which they've tried to make the World Cup smaller and less accessible. Again, at
Yeah.
least football is getting more teams into the FIFA World Cup. At least we managed to see teams that we don't normally see, and it's a great watch. When Saudi Arabia beat Argentina, who won the World Cup, it was a great day. You don't get any of that if you're just watching England, India, Australia, South Africa, basically fighting out all these tournaments. We want to see Papua New Guinea playing in them. The story of Afghanistan in the last decade has been unbelievable. So that's my hope. Um, but you are way more qualified to talk about Jay Shah than I am. So what do you reckon? How do you see the next few years under his tenure?
Hmm. So I'd leave the doom and gloom to you. And because I think the rupee reference is probably the Jay Shah effect, because I didn't expect you to be uttering the Indian currency when talking about money. I'd just quickly reflect on his BCCI tenure thus far. Now, there'd be multiple people involved in ensuring that these steps were taken, but Jay Shah was also the secretary. And also, to add to your point, uh, before that as well, there've been ICC chairmen that have been elected unopposed. I don't think there's much to read into that, but I'd get back to it later. So, women's T20 challenge had been happening for a while. There were calls for women's Premier League to be introduced, and that got introduced under Jay Shah in 2023. Equal pay for men and women as far as match fees are concerned. And then again, in 2021, there was a salary hike for domestic cricketers. It was long awaited. In 2022, there was hike in monthly pension of former cricketers and umpires. And again, earlier this year, there was new test cricket incentive scheme. So, test cricket incentive scheme around the time when the players were also asked to prioritize domestic cricket and first class cricket. New NCA is in place, and the work on it got halted because of COVID-19, but it has resumed, and very soon we'd have it. So, in terms of developmental works to ensure that there's equality in cricket, there have been steps that have been taken. So, that's not a bad precedence. Going ahead, there'd be probably some controversies because the Champions League is scheduled to be held in, rather, Champions Trophy is scheduled to be held in Pakistan. What India's stance is going to be on the subject in case of Asia Cup as well, we got to know it pretty late that India would not be traveling to Pakistan, so it was held in a hybrid mode. And we've had Indian administrators before helming the ICC. There was Jagmohan Dalmia, and his work at BCCI remains unparalleled because of the time he came in and how he ensured that not just India but Asia, South Asia, got its rights at the ICC. And then there was Shashank Manohar as well. There was Sharad Pawar, and so there have been four presidents, rather chairmen before. In case of Shashank Manohar, in fact, Srinivas had ensured that BCCI and India and Australia and England got most of the chunk out of the ICC revenues. But Shashank Manohar then fought on behalf of ICC and other countries, other cricket playing countries, and consequent to that was reduction in share of the big three. So that has happened before, and we've seen an Indian actually argue for the rights of other countries, and that consequented again in India's share being reduced. So that has happened before. So is it something that you're expecting from Jay Shah as well, or is it I mean, that's holistic, but also the fact that there is merit to the discussion around India getting bulk of the money, because people who argue in favor of it also say that India generates the bulk of the revenue. And that's also very apparent. And that's also the reason why every country wants India to tour it.
Yeah, so if it's a question, it depends where the money goes. I think, like, if you hear the story of Jaiswal and how he's come up, you know,
Yeah.
um, living in the groundsman's tent or whatever it was, and his backstory is an amazing read. Um, and if the the Indian revenue goes towards making sure that the pathways for these talented kids make their lives and their families' lives easier, you don't want, and it's not good for society, it's not good for people, abject poverty, um, for these kids that have amazing talent becoming multi-millionaires almost overnight. When you're someone like Jaiswal who has the ceiling that he's got, he's all format gun. It's not healthy for anybody to go from not being able to afford a roof over your head to suddenly you're kind of naming your price at auctions. There needs to be a better pathway for that to happen. So when it comes to, like, so India have all the wealth in terms of, or they have most of the wealth in terms of cricket, but it's not distributed fairly amongst its people, right? Whereas England, it has way more because of private schools and stuff like that over here. Cricket is a posh game, in the school that
Yeah.
I started at, they didn't play cricket. Um, where I went to sixth form, we didn't have a cricket team, for example. But um, all of the private schools, and if you look at Zach Crawley's story, which is his dad had money, wealthy family, decided that he wanted Zach to be a cricketer, so paid absolute fortunes for him to go round the world being coached by all the best coaches in India and Australia and everywhere else, and kept ploughing money. And you can be successful if you put in thousands of hours. You've got a certain degree of natural talent. But
Yeah.
I would suggest, I don't think this is outlandish to say that Jaiswal's talent is way higher than Zach Crawley's natural talent. But he had to come through an almost impossible pathway, like, covered in thorns and stones and glass and stuff, whereas Crawley was like chauffeur driven to his England cap. Um, so the argument that, oh well, they generate more money, so they should get more money. If if it's only India that are any good in 30 years' time, the sport will die, and you can say
Yeah.
it will become like America, where it's just America still think that they're world champions when their ice hockey team, when Detroit Red Wings win the ice hockey, they go, we're champions of the world. So, well, you're not, mate. You played in a league where there's one or two countries that play in it. So you're not the champions of the world. The NFL running around with a massive trophy saying we're world champions, having the biggest party in sport and all this. You're not, because nobody else plays that sport. So that's the way India will be. It will just be like, and it'll be all these, for want of a better expression, bookie leagues that keep cropping up of 10 over nonsense. There was one the other day. Um, I don't even know where it was. Ben Menenti was opening the batting. I'm pretty sure that Carlos Brathwaite was in it. Did you see him smacking a helmet into the stands the other day? So
No.
he got out, threw his helmet off, and played one of his best shots in the last 5 years. Smashed the helmet way over the boundary rope. Really funny.
I'm
Um,
astonished he still plays.
yeah,
I
well,
saw him in the commentary box.
he gets money for, he's probably a better bowler than a bat these days. But when Brathwaite, Ben Dunk, Ben Menenti are on my television, there's something wrong with the sport now, because there's like two test matches on at the same time. There seems to be ODIs happening. There's still T20I series going on, millions of franchise tournaments. Like, all of this is knackered. So Jay Shah's job, I'm not really qualified to say about distributing money and revenue and all this sort of thing. But if cricket doesn't look after all its countries, and that's the job of the ICC, is the International Cricket Council, right? It's all of the nations are supposed to be looked after. So I'm going to be nudged towards politics, which I know nothing about, and I don't know what the fairest way is. Like, if England have got plenty of money, you don't need to give England as much as you might need to give Afghanistan. We need to get to a state where India and Pakistan, two of the biggest cricketing nations ever, can play each other on a regular basis without it being an international security risk for everybody. Right? We need to get to that stage. We need to get to the stage where ICC tournaments aren't organised by, right, let's decide when India are going to play Pakistan and where that's going to happen first, and then we'll do the draws and all that stuff. Because that's not fair sport. That's not what sport's meant to be. That, well, yeah, we've got to make sure that they're in the same group or they play in the quarterfinal. That's not fair, right? So Jay Shah's job is to make it fair. The Again, that going back to the football example of they share the TV money out, that sounds fair. And it doesn't matter that more people watch Man City on the telly than watch Ipswich. They're all playing in the Premier League, so they can all share the money out. So once you've got your affiliation with the International Cricket Council, start helping these smaller countries grow. Like, look at the work that the ECN is doing now, the European Cricket Network.
Yeah.
And that's basically some passionate people. I've met these guys. Some passionate people led by a bloke called Dan Weston, who love cricket. That's their goal. They're not doing it to make boatloads of cash. I'm sure they make a few quid, and I'm pretty sure they enjoy their lives. But they don't want it to be that, oh, look, we're just going to try and make England a bit richer, or the main guy's an Aussie. It's like, we don't want to make Australia a bit richer. They're like, he was living in Germany or somewhere, and he went, well, wouldn't it be great if people could play Germany in Germany? And all of a sudden, he put a few things on YouTube, saw how many people wanted to get involved with this sort of stuff, and managed to grow the game in multiple countries. It was basically one or two guys on a budget of nearly nothing who loved the game that much, and they're pretty charismatic people, but they managed to spread that message and get cricket growing in countries where previously no one's really been that bothered about it. And that is what, if I was in charge of the ICC, which, you know, will presumably happen one day,
When?
that's what you want to leave, that legacy, though, don't you?
What is your target like?
I think, well, I'm 41 now, right? So I'm already wasted 6 years
You
behind.
constantly
Jay Shah.
remind us of that, right?
Yeah. It's because I know, like, people probably think I'm 26 or something, but yeah, it'd be a travesty if I wasn't head of the ICC by the time I'm 50. But Jay Shah has to think, right? Look at how much he's achieved as a 35-year-old, right? It's ridiculous. So he needs to think, what do I want my legacy to be? Do I want to make cricket must be better off when I'm out of here, not India must be richer? Because again, if India's richer, that's great, because there's loads of poverty in India. And again, the biggest problem with a lot of countries is the percentage of wealth owned or
concentrated in the hands of
the few, right? They're like 1% of people control 98% of the wealth or whatever. That is nonsense. That, you know, that's what you're trying to avoid. And we've seen many a country fail because of that in history. And we don't want cricket to fail because of that. So that's his job. And I'm not clever enough to tell you how you're meant to distribute all the money, but it doesn't look like it's being done fairly at the moment, when you see teams not being able to travel to places and boards falling out because they can't pay players. And, you know, look at the history of Zimbabwe in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Look at and who have,
But
right, you're not in the ICC
it was also
anymore,
down to the
guys.
corruption within and mismanagement in
And
case
again,
of Zimbabwe or Kenya for that matter.
And why can't the ICC step in there and help out, like a United Nations sort of thing, and just look after these countries that are like, right, if you're in turmoil,
Can a global governing body step in and supplant kind of the national federation or the body in control?
I don't know what the rules are now. I don't know whether the ICC can say, look, your board is clearly not fit for purpose because you're not paying your players, yet you're controlling them and you're deciding that these 3 people who are your best players aren't allowed to play. but you won't let them play in the franchise stuff. There's a lot of that going on. It should be that the people governing cricket are able to step in and say, right, we're gonna cowboy this and organise it better, and step away when you've proved that you can organise it yourselves. But that only works if they're willing to back that up with cash and say, look, we'll provide the money to make it happen, but they must have enough in reserve, which doesn't necessarily make, the IPL owners all a bit richer, or all the franchises worth a few more billion rupees or whatever. It should be that cricket tries to look after itself.
Hmm. That's very important. Now, before we conclude this topic of Jay Shah, because constantly people have been chiding me in the comment section, reminding me to talk about West Indies versus South Africa, because that also features in our headline and our title. We'd get to that shortly. But can Jay Shah be Seb Blatter? And Seb Blatter, of course, we remember him for the corruption allegations. But before that, there was a huge body of work that he did for football. And that went a long way in democratizing football and taking football to smaller countries, uh, to around the world, to countries around the world who were earlier maybe not as invested in the game. And today we see how enormous football's impact is around the world. Now, Ben Franklin has summoned Mary Shelley to talk about Jay Shah here. And like we discussed earlier, India has had four different people at the top of the ICC. There was N. Srinivasan and people before that as well, Jagmohan Dalmia included. He is recalling here Shashank Manohar's example and how he fought for money being distributed more evenly amongst the member nations. And then again, Rutuj has an interesting point. I'd just flash it in front of you, Rob, for you to take it up. And also, there have been requests from people for you to be a bit louder, because at the moment, apparently, they're not able to hear you properly.
Sorry.
And yeah, I think that's more like it. And then Hari Krishna has been talking about if cricket can be taken to Spain. And you talked about the European Cricket Network, if that would be contributing to Spain taking more interest in cricket. And yeah, that's pretty much it about Jay Shah. So, yeah,
Okay,
all right.
I can talk about cricket in Spain because I lived there for 9 years,
Wow.
um, and have played cricket terribly badly in Spain and Gibraltar. And there is actually quite a few of these ECN leagues now. Barcelona was one, and ECN Barcelona is the most run scory, roady, easy to hit six pitch that there's ever been in any form of cricket. I remember trying to trade it, or help the traders here at Decimal, and what they did is they wanted a bit like when Shane Warne tried to take cricket to New York and Florida. They wanted short boundaries, good pitch, so they laid basically wooden bouncy floorboards underneath the artificial pitch, and then they played it in a baseball ground with a 35-meter boundary on the leg side, and everything hopped up nicely into the slot. And it was about, there was it was T10 tournament, and it was regular that you were getting scores of 230. So Spain like watching runs. Cricket is getting a bit bigger in Spain. We shouldn't talk about that for too long, but it's the ECN does amazing work, and it is helping grow the game of cricket. As far as what Jay Shah is going to do and what his history is, I think we've covered enough of him. One
Hmm.
thing I do want to say is he got into a court case with the guys that wrote The Wire. That's what I read the other day.
Mm-hmm.
That's really funny. If you come at the king, you best not miss and all that. And that got shut down pretty quick. So, and those guys have, written the best TV show possibly ever, whilst exposing all sorts of levels of corruption, in the police and drug dealers and all the rest of it, of a city that they knew like the back of their hand. And they had a run at Jay Shah trying to moan about stuff that he'd been doing. I think it was that they'd said that when Modi was in charge, Jay Shah was suddenly worth an awful lot more, or his businesses were, or whatever. And Shah went, "You can't talk about me like that," and shut them all down. So he seems like he's pretty strong. I don't think he's going to be too weak to do the job. That's for sure. Are we going to
Hmm.
go Windies now?
Indeed.
Do you want to know
So should I?
the single most shocking thing of that T20 series?
Yeah.
Romario Shepherd, 4 overs, 3 for 15. Don't know how it
Yeah.
happened. Watched it with my own eyes. Don't know how it happened. He also bowled well in the last game. Don't know how it happened. I can only assume that South Africa have gone to the dogs completely in terms of the batting when Klassen isn't there, because that's not possible. It's not possible that Romario can take wickets and go at 4 or 5 and over. Don't understand.
Hmm.
3.75 and over his economy was in the second one. But yeah, I think South Africa have found out that Rickleton and Reza is not the opening partnership that's going to scare anyone the way people play T20s now. I think the West Indies will gain a lot of confidence, but really
Yeah.
it was the South Africa B team. Markram didn't do very well, did he? He didn't
Yeah.
score
He
many.
didn't.
And it shows how big a player Klassen is for them. And they need to address, in the kind of post-de Kock era, what they're going to do at the top of the order, South Africa. Very good series for Stubbs, but the backup
Hmm.
bowlers for South Africa look quite bad to me.
Yeah.
I think Stubbs is the one that came out of it from South Africa with his stock higher, and
Hmm.
whereas the guy that impressed me most from the West Indies wasn't Pooran, because we know Pooran can do that. Pooran did 2 good ones and 1 bad one in those 3, but Shai Hope has gone from
Yeah.
somebody 2 or 3 years ago who I was one of the many people that said he shouldn't be playing T20 cricket because he can't
Hmm.
get on with it enough. And his strike rate has gone up so much in the last 2 years. He's suddenly worked out how to do it. And whether that was just an intent thing or he's gone away and worked at his game, tremendous effort. He looks like a proper T20 bat now. And when
Indeed.
he was, it was Delhi, wasn't it, that signed him? And you think,
Yeah.
why are they signing Hope? And it wasn't that long ago that West Indies were chasing 30 odd in a super over, and they sent Hope out to bat, and everyone was laughing their heads off. Now he is a guy that you would consider if he's had a decent knock in the actual game. So he's one for the Windies that's a massive tick. I wouldn't get carried away if you're a West Indies fan about Romario's bowling, because 8 overs doesn't turn the worst death bowler I've ever seen into a good one. But what if he can bowl? That would be amazing for the West Indies if he turns into a bowler. I don't think we learnt masses from that series. I think both sides are looking for openers. Both sides need more depth in the fast bowling or to keep their main guns fit.
Hmm.
Did you see much of it, Megha?
Yeah, I did follow it on and off, and like you talked about Tristan Stubbs, him emerging as the highest run getter in the series. That's a huge positive for South Africa, much needed positive for South Africa. And I'd throw in some numbers here. In the previous T20 cycle, from 2022 World Cup to 24 World Cup, out of the 11 matches played, they just won 2 of those. In the last 18 months, this is their third loss to West Indies on either side of the World Cup. They lost to West Indies 3-match series. Obviously, we've been talking about the fact that it's been second string South Africa, but West Indies too were missing out on some players at least. And we saw what South Africa can do at the World Cup, 8 successive wins, although some of those were cliffhangers, but they made it till the finals and lost out narrowly to India, couldn't lift the title, but they were solid then. But on either side of it, it's just shambles. And this is not what you expect from a team of South Africa's stature and legacy, considering the sort of talent that they boast of. Even for Aiden Markram, it's been 12 innings since he scored a half century in T20Is. Their top order is struggling massively. There's so much responsibility for the middle order to shoulder, and there's only so much that one player can do. And again, in the bowling department as well, tried out new players. The frontline bowlers were missing. Some were rested, others were out due to injury, but the ones that got the opportunity didn't really leave a great account of themselves. So South Africa obviously would want to pull up their socks, because again, regardless of what sort of team they're sending, it is a disappointing result, and it is something that would cause them some brainstorming there to get out of.
Yeah, very, very good points and well summed up that was. I think Mafaka is someone I'd want to talk about. I mean, he's still
Hmm.
only 18. He has, in the T20s I've seen him, when he got murdered in the IPL, that was a bad look. That none for 66 against SRH. I guess anybody
Sunrises, yeah.
can get battered
Yeah.
by those guys. But they've got to be careful with him, because yes, he was unbelievable at a young age in the under 19 World Cup. But the difference between the under 19 World Cup, ask Jewel Brevis and many others, and the top level of the game is a massive chasm. So just because he was brilliant in the under 19 World Cup at the age of 16 or 17, it doesn't mean when he's just turned 18 that you can play him lots in T20s, because if they do, like Rabada can't get on the park that much anymore, because um, he's been used in every game in every format by South Africa, and he plays the franchise stuff and full IPL seasons when he can and all this. So Rabada, when he came onto the Test match scene, looked like he was the future of South African cricket. That's how good he was. And a bit like Shaheen, who isn't even playing in the next Test match, um, you can get burnt out if you're precociously talented early, and then your country goes, right, you're just going to play for us all the time. The big danger with Mafaka is, at the moment, what he is potential, and he isn't the finished product at all. He's 18 years old. He can bowl fast, but when he plays on a good pitch against aggressive batsmen in T20s, he's
Yeah.
going to get spanked a lot right now. It's a bit like being a leggy. It doesn't matter if you can rag it miles. If you bowl two bad balls and over, you're going to go for 12 or 15 and over now. Um, so they got to work with him and protect him a bit, and maybe get him out of the firing line. And it's going to be really tempting for him and his people to say, right, let's take this money that we're getting playing for MI, whoever, Mumbai Indians and
Hmm.
Emirates and whoever else. Um, South Africa need to be really careful with this guy, because he could be somebody that we're talking about in 15 years as being a great bowler for South Africa, but he could also be somebody that 2 years from now you're saying, do you remember when that guy, everyone thought he was amazing, and then he got spanked about 10 times and no one ever heard about him again. So
Hmm.
they need to be really careful with him. He's definitely got talent. He's definitely got something about him. But if there was a big game tomorrow and he was playing aggressive bats on a good pitch, he will get spanked again. So they need to be careful with him.
Indeed, but he does come with a lot of promise, and that was on display during the Under 19 World Cup as well. But needs to be carefully nurtured for him to bounce back from the matches where he gets taken for plenty. Well, that's all the time we have as far as today's podcast is concerned. Thank you so much, Rob, for joining. Thank you all for joining and also chipping in with your comments. We'd see you again tomorrow. And until then, it's goodbye and take care. Remember to follow us across our social media platforms. We'd keep providing you with updates and snippets from our podcast. So thank you and bye bye.